Welcome to Painted Haint. I am your host, Adri Hayes, and the Liberty Kid that your British grandmother as well, warned you about. So this is part 2 of what I call Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Scary, in which, in honor of the 250th anniversary of America being America, we talk about ghost stories and legends from all 13 original British colonies. And the first one we're going to start with is Cape Henlopen Ghost Light, or the Cape Henlopen Ghost Light. So, located where the Delaware Bay and Atlantic Ocean meet sits Cape Henlopen. So this place holds a terrifying legend called the Cape Henlopen Corpse Light. So legend has it that this light lures ships to their demise. But the legend itself has several different origins, one of which involves Native Americans who placed a curse on European settlers after specifically British soldiers invaded and slaughtered attendees to a sacred wedding ceremony. So the curse is said to vow death to all white men who enter those shores. And there's probably a lot of white men in Delaware, so that must be very difficult. So the second legend is, I don't know, this one's kind of cool to me. This is the Bad Weather Witch. So in this version, the Phantom Light is said to be an evil storm summoning sea witch who delights in shipwrecking and guarding. Not only is she like attacking ships, it's because she's guarding a sunken treasure. I don't know why does I want to, not that I want to believe that, but it's more so it's like, wow, that's more interesting. Although the other version sounds historical more than anything. Like both of them they have their merits, but that second one, the Sea Witch, kind of dig it. So the third version, so again, there are many versions, involves the souls of trapped sailors, and the light is said to be emitted by the vengeful spirits of those deceived sailors. And maybe that ties in with the Sea Witch. I'm thinking those two kind of blend together, but either way, that's terrifying. And what's even more scarier is there was actually a ship that was lured by this light. And so here's the story. So there was a ship called the HMS Debrack. It was a British ship, and they apparently crashed into the Cape, or off the Cape. And one of the survivors said that the reason they steered in that direction was because they saw this light and they thought it was maybe someone guiding them to shore, or like a lighthouse situation. On top of that, the HMS Debrack sinking disaster is what I would really call it, has its own ghost story. So the captain of that ship, of course, died along with 46 of the crew members. And they say that you can see him walking out of the cemetery that he's buried at. So his ghost walking out of the cemetery, and he's said to be looking for his dead crew. So the Cape Henlopen has got like just a plethora, a smorgasbord of ghost stories attached to it. And that's in Delaware. So if you are in Delaware, check it out. Check out Cape Henlopen. So this next story is one that I actually heard on, it was a show on Weather Channel. Y'all might know it, where they used to talk about like basically supernatural events that were weather related. So they had like Aunt Julia Brown on there from Louisiana. They had the Pawleys Island Gray Man from South Carolina. But this one comes out of Maryland, and this is the legend of Maul Dyer. And this is yet another story where a woman in an American colony is accused of being a witch because reasons. Here's my thing. I think it's because, she was basically, if you think about it, these people were chemists because she was a healer. So the other people were like, I don't want to call them stupid, but like not very intelligent. So let's get into it. So there was a woman named Maul Dyer. And Maul was a healer who often aided her community. So she's helping these people out with soothing illnesses or making illnesses better, even curing, using what she knew as far as like herbology, which is not just a Harry Potter thing, it's a real thing. But using like the herbs and things that she knew in nature would help to heal people. And I would even say creating her own compounds. However, when an influenza epidemic hit during the winter of 1617, the townspeople, which was Leonardtown, Maryland, would turn on her and blame her for the epidemic, because everyone knows that women cause illnesses. And they didn't just blame her. So they didn't just like point fingers and be like, hey, you did this. No. They set fire to her cabin. And keep in mind, this is the winter in Maryland. And if you've ever been in Maryland in the winter, you know it can get cold. They actually have winters in comparison to where I live here in Georgia. So Maul Dyer would escape the fire initially, escape her home. But she did not survive because she was running through the forest and, there was no cover. So she was later found with one hand frozen to a large rock, with the other hand reaching skyward. So she froze to death. And I read that I think it was a child that found her. And yeah, 18th century children are not like, they're not like us. I would know, obviously I'm one. But they've seen some things. And I think even this freaked out this little boy. And guess what? You can see that rock today because it was found in like the 60s or 70s. And they placed it at the Old Jail Museum in the town square of Leonardtown, Maryland. So what's even scarier and unnerving is her hand and knee prints are said to still be visible on the rock. So if you go there to the museum, you can still see these handprints and this knee print. People also say that Maul Dyer put a curse on the land along with the rock, because the rock was on the land. And furthermore, rumor has it that touching the rock can cause dizziness and illness. And isn't that something? That's very ironic, because it's like, here she was curing people, and her curse makes people ill. So that's very creative, Miss Dyer. And also shame on the townspeople for accusing someone they went to help for, and then like being like, well, I don't understand her, so I'm gonna if this is weird, so let me put a curse on you. Let me attack what I don't understand, pretty much. And I think that they probably called her a witch in benevolent terms, but then when everyone got sick, they were like, oh, she caused this, which is crazy. So, wow. Trigger warning. This story it's pretty rough. So if you're someone that suffers from mental illness or anything like that, you might want to sit this one out. Because, I mean, even in today's society, mental health, I would assume that someone, if they're dealing with something, would be triggered by the way that people were treated back in the day for the same condition they may have. So we're going to Virginia now. We are coming on down the pipe. We are going to talk about the Public Hospital of Williamsburg, now called Eastern State Hospital. So the Public Hospital of Williamsburg opened in 1773 after being advocated for by Virginia Lieutenant Governor Francis Folklore. So it is considered to be the first mental hospital in British America, and it contained only 24 rooms and was meant to serve as a safe space for people with mental illness. That's like the PR version, because I read that on the Williamsburg website. But if you think about it, it was also meant to keep those people, those elements in, because a lot of these people had severe mental illness, especially for that time, the 18th century. The first patients were Zachariah Malloy, who had been housed at the county jail, so that shows you how they thought of mentally ill people, and Catherine Harvey, so she was the other patient. Now, while African Americans were not permitted to be patients at the hospital, there was and this is a word we don't use anymore, children, mulatto or mixed race woman who stayed there as well. So she was placed there because she was white passing, pretty much. So not much is known about the day-to-day operations of the hospital, but this being the 18th century, I mean, we can put on our thinking caps and pretty much figure out what was going on. So this will give you an idea, actually. So rooms were fitted with barred windows and reinforced doors so that they resembled a prison cell more than a hospital. And I'm going to post some pictures if I can find like the ones that like this description is, describing basically. The patients did not even have proper beds. So instead, they were given mattresses filled with straw. And that's disgusting because we all know that straw can hold bugs. And we already know what the hygiene situation was like in the 18th century. There wasn't even proper bathroom facilities. So these people were given basically a bucket for them to do their business in. And to add the rotten cherry on top, the rooms contained shackles, because if you got a little while, they would shackle you down. Also, this is the other part. They were permitted to go outside, but they were only permitted, the patients were only permitted to go outside if, not if, they were permitted. So when they went out, when they were put or had their little outside time, they would go into a courtyard within the prison. So you can see they were not treated very well for needing the help that they needed. Then there were the treatments. Again, trigger warning, if you can call them treatments. So one that sticks out to me is the tranquilizer chair. Now, this was invented by Dr. Benjamin Rush, who is actually a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he was also a physician. He's also considered the father of American psychiatry. Wow. So this man believed, now keep in mind, the father of American psychiatry, keep that in mind. This man believed that mental imbalances were caused by brain inflammation. So he invented or created this chair that contained a box that was placed over the eyes, so that the poor soul who was forced to sit in this contraption could not see what was going on. And to make matters worse or more distressing, they would inject the patient with laxatives. So not only are they using a syringe from the 18th century, my God, have y'all seen one of those? I saw one at the Mel Fisher Museum, and good Lord. I was like, I would not wish that on anyone. So they're injected with laxatives. And if you see this chair, which I will post a picture of this chair, you'll notice there's a hole in the seat where, like, where you sit. And that was so that they could evacuate their bowels while they sat in the chair that was supposed to calm them down. Dr. Rush, how does diarrhea, let's just cut the crap, pun intended, how does diarrhea calm one down? Asking for a friend, because it doesn't. So of course this place is crawling with spirits, ghosts. The spirits stuck here are, of course, patients for one. People have reported hearing chains and manacles rattling throughout the old hospital, the chains that were in the rooms. There have been even cases where people felt what the patients felt. So basically they feel the symptoms of, say, somebody with bipolar disorder, or I would even say anxiety, which I have, and I can tell you do feel like you're dying when you have a panic attack. It's almost like they're being possessed. But one of the creepiest experiences is hearing the sound of procedures occurring from long ago. And I can only imagine what those procedures sound like. Because, this is... Okay, keep in mind, this hospital was open until the 60s. And we went through a lot of trial and error with the mental health field. So I'm pretty sure somebody heard of a phantom lobotomy at some point, and I don't want to hear that, or shock therapy, or... So yeah, like imagine you're in there doing your ghost hunting, or it's a museum, so you're doing a tour and you hear that. I would leave. I don't care how much the admission is. I'll be like, I heard something that I didn't need to hear. Deuces. So now those are general encounters, but there are two spirits that we know of. One is the spirit of Dr. John Minson Galt. He's one of the good ones. So Dr. Galt was a doctor at the hospital in the 1840s who took a more compassionate approach to the patients using a method called moral management therapy. So during his time, the torture treatments were low, like there were basically no more, like that wasn't a thing. He would actually take them out on field trips into Williamsburg and the surrounding areas, much like you see people do today with, like, say, dementia patients, or I know, like, during the school year on Fridays, they'll take the special needs students out to the mall. So it kind of reminds me of that sort of vibe. Now, during the Civil War, however, Dr. Galt would take his own life after being unable to help the patients he so dearly cared for, because I believe it was the Union Army took over the hospital and they were not apparently treating the patients very well. And, with him unable to help, he ended up taking his own life. So he is said to walk the halls of the hospital still trying to care for his patients that he so dearly cared for, which is very touching. I like that, especially from the 1800s, because that's like mid-tier, we're going to do some awful stuff to fix people. Now then there's Mary. Now, okay, I don't know how true this story is, but as far as like a legend, but I don't know, it's still scary. So the story goes that Mary was admitted to the hospital for hysteria, which is a catch-all term for I can't control this woman, so I'm going to send her to the chokey. That's what I understand hysteria as. So apparently she was put in that awful tranquilizer chair in life where she would actually die. So she died as a result of being in the chair. So her spirit is said to still occupy the chair in the museum, and even more terrifying, she screams. So people will either walk by and see this woman sit in the chair, or they will hear her screaming from the chair. Down to the Carolinas. So we are now in North Carolina, and we are going to talk about a story that sounds like something from Harry Potter. I don't know. There is like a fantastic beast, shall we say, in Harry Potter that when I first read this title, I was like, that sounds like something Newt Scamander would snatch up. But here we go. So this is the Little Red Man of Old Salem. And this is one I am embarrassed to say I did not know about. And I have been to Winston-Salem. So I was like, oh, I've never heard of this. Of course, I'm always focused on the coast, so my bad. But let's get into it. So the Little Red Man of Old Salem comes from the death of a man by the name of Andreas Kremser. So Kremser was a resident of the Single Brothers house, which was a home for men who were single, basically. It's like a boarding house. And he was a shoemaker by trade. And that's going to play into the story in a few minutes, so you wait on that. So he was also a very helpful person, apparently, because he helped to dig out a cellar for the Single Brothers house. I guess he figured, I live here, I might as well, help. So while digging out the cellar, a bank of dirt he'd shoveled out collapsed on him. And Kremser was rescued, but because he had suffered so much severe injury to his body, he died a few days or a few hours after this rescue. So following his death, residents in the house began hearing the rhythmic tapping of a shoemaker's hammer. I don't like that. Because, living out here in the country, I've heard some things, and I'll be like, I heard somebody moaning one time, out in the street. And no, I did not go to my window. Because this is the South. We don't do that kind of stuff. We are too close to Appalachia. But that's only the beginning. Because on some classic Harry Potter Newt Scamander-ish, as I mentioned earlier, people started seeing a little red man dressed in a red cap and red jacket scurrying through the halls. The residents of the house tried to send this little red man, over to the other side. So they brought in a preacher to do an exorcism, and he didn't leave. Or they said he left and came back, something like that. So to this day, people report seeing this red man, and if they don't see him, they hear him or feel him. So the hearing part is creepier to me than the feeling part, because this is how the hearing part goes. They say that you'll hear tapping of a shoe hammer, so it's like a cobbler working on a shoe. And they said that sometimes the shoe is sometimes the tapping is rhythmic, as though somebody's in the zone in their task making the shoe. Other times the tapping becomes frantic, and they say that is Mr. Kremser trying to get out of the cellar, or it's almost like a stone tape thing more than anything. Or maybe he doesn't realize he's dead because he died a few hours later, so he's reliving that fate, and he's trying to get out of the cellar. I am so sorry, y'all. My throat is scratchy. I just watched the World Cup, or the first World Cup match, and I think I may have aggravated my voice. They say that in addition to, so when I said you can smell him, it's not foul, You can usually smell basically the smell of shoes, what shoes are made of, or what shoemakers use to make shoes. So it's leather. It's probably the wood shavings. They said specifically wood shavings, or the what's that thing called where they put the shoe on there for you and they make the shoe. It's like a mold basically. You can smell that. You can even smell candle wax, as though someone has lit a candle and the candle's melting because they're working by candlelight. And you can actually visit this place. So North Carolinians, I'd go visit, but North Carolinians, you should check it out. And also, that's a really cool story, because when I first saw that title, I was like, is this literally a little red person? What is going on? Sounds oddly offensive. But when I looked into the story, I was like, oh, okay, classic ghost story. Now we move on to South Carolina. And we are going, so actually I have another story, but that one is a little wild. So we'll do that one separate. But we are talking about the Old Exchange and Provost in Charleston, because what better place to talk about than Charleston, since it is a colonial city. So the Old Exchange and Provost was completed in 1771, and this building has been many things, but what we're focused on is the fact that it was an exchange and a dungeon. Not just a jail, a dungeon. So during the American Revolution, British forces used the bottom floors of the exchange as a military prison, and they called it the Provost, or dungeon. People from all walks of life were held there in that dungeon. From American prisoners of war to private citizens to, of course, enslaved people. Because the exchange was upstairs. And you know what an exchange is. So the conditions in the dungeon were naturally terrible. It was pitch black down there. Space was limited, to say the least. And disease ran rampant because, they did not care about hygiene, especially for no prisoners. Today, down in the dungeon, people hear disembodied moans, crying, and screams that can freeze the blood even on the hottest South Carolina day. Then there's the ghost of a wealthy militia captain in Landover named Isaac Haynes. So he was held in the dungeon as a traitor, and he was executed for his alleged crimes. His spirit is said to pace the floors of the dungeon, and how you know it's him is because they say that you can hear heavy boots. And I guess he was said to have worn heavy boots while imprisoned there. The dungeon, of course, is not the only place where ghosts reside in the building. So in the upper floors is the exchange, and the exchange has seen some historical things, for lack of a better word. So they say that like the government officials held a dinner complete with a show for George Washington while he was president. So I'm not surprised that place has got some energy, both good and bad. So people in the exchange itself report running into people in period dress, so in colonial dress, and they think that they're a tour guide. And when they go to ask them a question or they move closer to them, the people disappear. I've always been past the exchange and the Provost dungeon, but I've never been in. So maybe I'll get a chance to do that this summer. And if I do, I am going to take photos and video. Hopefully I won't take a picture of something that I completely regret. Because I've been lucky. The places I go to, I've been lucky to have not taken pictures of some ish I don't quite understand. Now we are at the final spot. We are in the final 13th colony. Yeah, we were a jail colony. But without us, you wouldn't have peaches, pecans, Later on, Coca-Cola, Chattahoochee Champagne, aka Dasani Water, also a Coke product. The Varsity, Waffle House.
Yeah, I'll have a hash brown.
Bird's Cookies. Peanuts. Or the B-52s. We are talking about Georgia. My home. Oh, you also went at Ray Charles and the best state song in the world. Georgia on my mind. Welcome to Georgia. I'm glad you're here. Now we're going to zip on down to Savannah because that's one of the few colonial cities we have. Augusta's another one. Atlanta is a railroad city that was founded in the 1820s. So we ain't there yet. We've only hit our 100th year, which is cute. We got 150 more years to go. But we are going to talk about Tondi's Tavern. Also have a bit of a twist for you. We're not talking about the Tondi's Tavern that saw the American Revolution. Plot twist. No, we are talking about the Tondi's Tavern that is new. It was actually named for the OG Tondi's Tavern, which they do have a plaque that you can see where it originally stood. They lost it to fire, unfortunately, way back. But this Tondi's Tavern was built in not built, but it was opened in 2013. So this tavern, this particular location dates back to 1853. So back then, it contained 2 businesses. On the first floor sat the Central Railway and Banking Company. However, on the upper floors sat the offices of Joseph Bryan. And Joseph Bryan was a slaveholder. Well, not a slaveholder, slave broker. And an alleged Shanghaier of the men of Savannah. So if you don't know what Shanghaiing is, it's basically when someone is kidnapped and put on a ship to work as a sailor and taken out to sea, basically. And the farthest they could go was the port of Shanghai in China. That's why it's called Shanghai. So this building is so creepy on that enough. Like, you know, as a black person, that's terrifying. You know, and it's like right across from the old Cotton Exchange and the port, you know, the River Street, basically. So this building had pens where they would keep the slaves and the sailors, allegedly, and there are still remnants of that energy there today. So people have heard disembodied voices. There have been orbs seen in the place, although while I am a believer of ghosts, sometimes orbs can be dust. But the way they described these orbs, they were like, they were like as big as, like, I don't know, an apple, like huge orbs, right? And I don't know what kind of dust is that big. If you got dust that big, you got problems. On top of this, they say that within the restaurant itself, you can see there's a woman. You see a woman who appears on the stairs, and she just stares at the restaurant. You know, the people in the restaurant probably like, what the hell is going on here? And then just leaves. There's even poltergeist activity. And this poltergeist activity, they say it's playful, but I think they're just trying to nice it up. Because you got to keep in mind, there were people here who were held against their will. So I would think they'd be a little PO'd. Because I remember one story or one thing I read was that things have been thrown. Glasses thrown. Glasses breaking. Hell, people even been... Okay, people weren't there. But that's Moon River Brewing Company, which is now closed. But in this case, in this Tondi's Tavern, people, like I said, they witness things being thrown across the bar, or people will pull on their hair or be poked in the back. I mean, it is just it's just a plethora of poltergeist activity, and those are said to be the victims of this Brian man and his business. So there you have it. That is the 13 colonies and 13 creepy tales. So one tale for each colony. Also, the fact that it's 13 is not lost on me. As I was finishing this up last night, I was like, why 13? I mean, I guess because they couldn't get any more land, but okay, that's why you lost your land, Brittany. So I have enjoyed doing this. I love dressing up, and I hope you enjoyed this special as well. And if you can't get enough of this 250th celebration of American spirits, you can check out my bonus content on TikTok, and that's at Hank Blue Ree. And there I will be doing American Monday Scaries up until the 4th of July. Actually, I might continue it as part of my Summerween content. But please like, comment, and subscribe, and enjoy this historic 4th of July. Thank you for watching. Bye.